I met some vaccine cynics who loved the idea of doing their own research about COVID-19, but who did not understand excess death curves that reveal some pretty key facts about the brutality of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is for them. It's just a quick explainer of one excess death plot in the COVID era. Just to get oriented, the plots you're about to see all lay out on a timeline that goes from January to December. Here's the deal. If you take the average number of people who die each week and you plot those weekly average numbers of deaths as a straight baseline, you can then compare different years most clearly to see when death rates are normal and when they're just not. This red baseline represents weekly averages from the 3 years before the COVID pandemic. Against that line, it's easy to see that 2015 was pretty average for all deaths from all causes across the US. 2016, about average. 2017 was pretty normal, except this spike in deaths that winter partly reflected a once-in-a-generation spike in influenza, which really stood out as a doozy that year. In 2018, those deaths continued through January and February of the same winter. Then things go back roughly to normal in 2019, and at the beginning of 2020, a completely new coronavirus crossed over to humans and reached the US for the first time. See if you can detect the coronavirus effect here. These are US deaths in 2020 compared to the weekly average of the years before the pandemic. COVID-19 was a dirty bomb. It overwhelmed hospitals and morgues, and since then it has killed well over 1 million Americans. There were no vaccines until the very end of 2020, so all these deaths happened before the first vaccines were even available. 2021, also much deadlier than normal. 2022 up to this date has been a little better, but still much deadlier than normal. And notice, the death rates tend to rise in every COVID winter. I've met people who tell themselves that the excess deaths in these COVID years might have been caused by the vaccines. But to believe that, you have to ignore an awful lot of data that simply contradict that notion. First, the deaths started months before there were any vaccines. Second, in hundreds of experiments, unvaccinated people are much more likely to die from COVID than vaccinated people. Third, the spikes on these curves don't rise and fall with vaccination rates. They mirror the emergence of new COVID variants that infect more people. The timing of peaks and valleys here just doesn't correspond to vaccination patterns. We all owe a debt of gratitude to the scientists, doctors, and nurses who got vaccines invented and distributed to 268 million Americans and 5.4 billion people around the world. We can also thank the people of goodwill who opted in to vax up. That was a massive collective action achievement. COVID vaccines have saved millions of lives, and they provide some amount of protection to everyone, including anti-vaxxers, by reducing transmission. I'll explain that in another video for the people in the Do Your Own research crowd. Please like and follow to see more videos in this series to explain vaccine dynamics to curious people who have been looking for data but haven't been able to find it. You can also visit our website at vaccinated.us.